Cool, Andrew.
Hey,
Welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on.
thanks for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, man, we talked was it last week? It feels like it was forever ago, but we had a preliminary talk about what we can talk about here, but already like the weeks have kind of flown by. We talked about this earlier on about how time doesn't seem to be constant anymore.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's you know
yeah,
what? It's weird too because uh, as much as you feel like working from home every day, that the days would drag on. In my world, it feels like I don't have enough time.
hmm
It's like I wake up and all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and it's so weird. It's just a
yeah.
weird feeling right now.
It's weird because everything's more available to you because you can stop working, go to the kitchen, make yourself food, you know, see your
Yeah,
wife, see your kids, all this stuff. But the same thing that allows that flexibility kind of sucks up your time.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely, absolutely. Like you're absolutely right. Like I will go downstairs, see my kids, have lunch with them, which is kind of cool. It's like we all
Mhm.
have a communal lunch every day now, and then it's back upstairs to work, and the time just blows by. It's crazy. It's like normally in the office you're kind of walking in between meeting rooms, and that kind of makes things feel like it's moving quickly. I never anticipated sitting pseudo in isolation, because we still kind of connect with our team digitally, but pseudo in isolation, the day actually feels like it's actually quicker. It's super weird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm missing the office already. To be
Yeah.
honest, just to be able to separate life and work, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I mean, that's something to be said too, that routine. It's like
hmm
we become like a tribe of people where you wake up in the morning and you go on your merry way. And
Yeah.
this tribe, there's like a whole new tribe of people forming now, right? Around like digital fitness classes. I've seen like book clubs online now.
hmm
Me and my buddies now, we don't, it's funny, we all live in different parts of the GTA. So we don't see each other unless there's like a UFC fight on, and
Yeah.
we've formed a poker group Friday nights where we turn on House Party, and we see each other through House Party, and then we play poker on Poker Stars. Like that
Nice.
never would have happened if this all like if the pandemic never happened.
Yeah, me and my friends are doing the exact same thing tonight. We're doing poker.
There you
So I was
go.
glad to figure out the workaround that you're doing. But
Yeah,
aren't there sites that does that where like just like House Party kind of puts your face there, but you're also playing poker?
I think so. I mean, we did a makeshift. It was like
Yeah.
it actually was originally a Zoom thing. Like, okay, everyone jump on a
hmm
Zoom, and like, oh wait, there's an app that just allows us to really quickly connect.
hmm
So yeah, I've got like my laptop, and then I've got like my phone on House Party right there, and then it's super weird. We're at a digital table, but we're all seeing each other at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. So me and my friends, we're all, I guess, we run startups, or a few guys are in VCs, a few guys are everywhere in different facilities. But we call our poker nights the Corona stimulus package,
Yeah,
right?
I guess that's
So
one way of looking at it. It's definitely one way of looking at it. You know, taking that stimulus money and putting it to good use, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, it's crazy how much levels of gambling has gone up. I've been looking at that just because I got interested in just running poker between our friends.
Yeah,
But people are actually out there like increasing the actual rates of it, right? Because they're bored.
sure.
There's
Yeah, yeah,
nothing
yeah.
tough to do. I
Yeah.
mean, talking about that, like the transformation we see now in the technology space, right? Where people are, what does it say? What is that rule? Like it takes 6 weeks to build a habit.
Okay.
Well, we're 6 weeks in to to the lockdown,
Yep.
right? I think this is
Yep.
the end of week 5, 6 weeks it's going in. So I feel like a lot of the things that now we've gotten used to, it's going to get set as practices, right? Set as habits. That's going
Yes.
to be very hard to break. If you
Yes.
think about it, right? And people talk about going back to normal. I'm like, what normal? We talked about it earlier on. It's like, what is the new normal going to be like, right? Even when the
Right.
lockdown gets lifted, a lot of this stuff is still going to linger. Working from home,
Absolutely.
staying from home, not going out, connecting through social, connecting to Zoom, connecting through these web links and technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how does that affect the state of the world? I think that's going to be interesting to figure out.
100%. And even further to that, I feel like it's a bit of a realization that we just denied self-consciously for so long, which is we knew technology was already connecting the world in many different ways, but there were still elements, especially like from a business standpoint, that people just didn't want to accept. Like even just the sheer fact of being in front of a camera to talk to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
that alone had been like, you know, WebEx, Cisco's
Mm-hmm.
platform, had been around for years. But, you know, how often would you go on a WebEx call where you're actually showing yourself versus you aren't, right? Now it's almost like these are things that already kind of existed. It's like, hey, everyone's slowly waking up to the fact that they already had this capability, and now they're finally utilizing it to its full extent, which
Mm-hmm.
then, to your point, kind of starts creating these habits that probably should have been instilled in us from the get-go. You know, the ability to collaborate and the way we operate through technology. Uh, we probably could have been better off at home for a while prior to this, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been here for a while, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's really opened up a lot of people's eyes, right? I think after the initial shock wore off, people are like starting to realize more on what we talked about before is how much money are we saving from like not having
Absolutely.
to go into the office, not having to drive around, not having to meal plan, and just figuring things out. Like this is the epitome of bootstrapping.
I posted on Facebook yesterday, I've had a full tank in my car for 3.5 weeks. And side note, I still have my winter tires on right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like a blizzard a few days ago.
I know.
We were
So
in Markham, right?
that
Yeah,
so that warrants it. So I'm okay
yeah.
still. I mean, it's the end of April, but whatever. I'm preparing for winter already. Like I'm not leaving my house, so it is what it is.
Brand new world, right? It's a new world.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's dig a little deeper into a few of the initiatives you're doing, right? So right now you're with Achu Health. Is it
That's right.
Achu?
Yep, it's a
Right,
chew.
Achu
Some
Health.
people call us ACU, but it's a chew.
Yeah, I keep mixing and matching those, but Achu Health. And also, you also lead. Why am I blanking on that?
I'm gonna
Athletes
let.
Tech Summit.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
there. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about that last time we spoke. I want to get a little dive deeper into that. Let's start with AccuHealth. Health. Sorry,
Yeah.
Acu Health.
To be honest with you, I think we should change it to ACU. ACU sounds cooler. Although we had a meeting earlier this week with a pretty senior ranking executive at Apple, and he actually really liked the name. He's like, "I'll always remember you guys." Well, okay, maybe someone higher up is saying that.
There's definite name recognition, right? Of course.
Absolutely, branding everything, branding over everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Achu, it's been interesting for us. Just to kind of give you context, like we've built a platform that allows you to take data around people's symptoms from a cold and flu standpoint and apply it to understanding trend analysis against where they're deviating against their benchmarks. So you know, taking as an example what we do with the Apple Watch and the iOS platform, with the user's consent, getting their health data to be able to give them a perspective as to where their health resides from an optimal standpoint, and then allowing them to see how they're deviating. So, you know, the typical example is the whole 7 hours of sleep, 10,000 steps a day, where that's not necessarily really optimal for anyone. It's kind of what was originally stated from a, I guess, health professional standpoint. But you and I both know, you know, getting 10,000 steps a day right now, maybe actually now you probably could, but typically, like being in an office space, especially, you're not getting 10,000 steps a day. It's not happening, right? 7 hours of sleep. I mean, that's another thing where that could be optimal for someone, but you know, some people, like my wife, she flies on 5 hours, 5 hours for her, and she is like a lightning bolt. And then further to that, even further, like when you're sleeping, right? You might get 7 hours of sleep, but you might have went to bed at 3 a.m. So are you still going to be rested? So we take a lot of those biomarkers and really understand how you deviate against those. And then we'll set you up with goals that are actually actionable and personalized to you. So now that we know that you can't do 10,000 steps a day, what is that actual number? Is it 3,000? Is it 2,000? And, you know, what is your lifestyle? Are you a mom on your feet all day with your kids? Are you in an office sitting at a chair? Like, what is that? What's your profile? So based on the data we collect, it's really around getting a persona created for you that allows us to create goals that are actually achievable for you. So that's kind of the product of what we built, and it lives right now on Fitbit. We're doing really well there, and then it will be launching on iOS very, very shortly. And then further to that, we run into this pandemic. And so, right off the bat, coronavirus, what is that? Well, symptoms of a coronavirus. I mean, a coronavirus is the typical cold in some respect, right? This one particularly obviously has its nuances and differences. But at its core, a lot of the symptoms have been exactly what we track already. So right out of the gate, you see all these emails and articles and call outs from different health and government entities saying, if you've got something, we need to talk to you, right? So right out of the gate, we were like, okay, it's our civic duty to at least see how we could repurpose what we have as a platform. And, money aside, grants aside, like, we're Canadians, like, our country is under stress the same way other countries are under stress. How can you help if you can't help, right? So we've effectively built out a platform that's kind of a spinoff. And so we can't predict COVID because we don't have the data set around COVID. But what we can do is help with tracking symptoms within regions, within cities, et cetera, and then further tailor that to an individual experience to understand where you reside and where those symptoms are. If you're experiencing them, you can report them as well. So we're currently in some discussions where this could become a real thing. Again, we built this in a way where we just want to stay ready. It's pretty sensitive right now when you're trying to introduce technology to a hospital, as an example. Like, for the most part, unless you've got ventilators and masks, like, they don't want to talk to you, right? Like, don't waste their time. And granted, so there's issues they need to deal with beyond technology. But there's some interesting discussions we're having, and so we'll see how this goes. The cool part is, I mean, it wasn't a heavy lift for us to build this because, again, we've already been doing this. This was a space we've already been in. So it was a bit of just repurposing them from a technology perspective. So it's been cool. It's been an interesting experience so far with the pandemic.
No, definitely. I mean, that's really interesting that you can do this kind of analytics because all the hardware exists, Fitbit, and the smartwatches that can pull all this information.
Absolutely.
So in this environment right now where, like, virtual care has become like the standard, it's blowing up right now, where doctors, not just doctors in primary care, but in allied health, mental health workers, psychologists, even like midwives, they can't get in contact with their patients anymore. Like, they shouldn't be, right? Under lockdown and quarantine. So they're having to rely on a lot of virtual care providers. But the biggest limitation, I was talking to a doctor about this, I came on our podcast, is that how do you even, like, diagnose the patient? How do you even check them? Like, how do you check the temperature?
Yeah.
Like, when they tell you they're hot, okay, how hot are you? What's the baseline, right? Do you have a thermometer? If you don't have a thermometer, how can I check you? So there's like a huge movement right now that even though virtual care space is getting better, how do we better diagnose people, right? Using tools on hand. I mean, do we send shipments of like, a preset amount of tools that can check, like, at least a baseline of assessments, right? Temperature check, pressure check, all that kind of stuff. Well, how expensive is that package? How can you get that to everybody?
Right.
But then a lot of people have these commercial products, smartwatches,
Sure.
right? Phones, these technology pieces that can already have some kind of sensors built in. So I think you bring up an interesting point, is that if we can pull the information from these sources and kind of link them with virtual care services, I think that could be a very fascinating discussion. Are you guys considering anything like that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, back to sort of what we were chatting about just a few minutes ago, where, habits and trends are starting to become like new habits, new trends kind of thing are becoming like the norm. I think, especially when it comes to the wearable market, we're definitely going to see a lot more intricacy around what a wearable can do for you around your health. Back in January, February, Tim Cook from Apple had mentioned that the watch would become like so integral to your health. And that's what they've been really pushing, just from conversations we've been having with Apple and understanding, different features that are kind of either rumored or already coming out on the Apple Watch. There is a pretty strong focus point on using the watch for health, right? And wearables in general, like Fitbit's doing the same thing. I read an article yesterday where, like, Fitbit and some executives there are thinking they could use Fitbit data in order to start predicting onset of COVID-19 as well. Like, these are things that, from what you said, like, they're readily available. It's just a matter of applying the technology and then adapting it Because there's also this other side of the coin, which is the whole fear of understanding all of this, right? How real is it? Do I really want to know what's real with my health, on a per second basis? I'm doing it myself. It's not through a doctor, that kind of thing, right? So there's a lot to kind of consider with regards to using a wearable and understanding what is possible versus, what you're pushing the boundaries with. That said, I mean, we know technology is the source for a lot of innovation from all different types of industries. And so you got to think from a medical standpoint, especially the way we live today currently, you most likely want to be able to leverage technology to its fullest effect. So if you can get insights on someone's, biomarkers, as an example, through a wearable, why not, right? You want to get their heart rate, you want to understand blood pressure, that kind of thing. You can get that today. You don't have to be in front of them. I think medicine and the healthcare industry in general, it can be pretty legacy at times. We're very familiar with that, and there's obviously a security around that, right? I mean, it's got to be risk adverse when you're dealing with people's lives. But then there are opportunities. So it's a matter of like understanding, from a wearable standpoint, especially, like what could you get where you're not necessarily putting anyone in danger. You're just empowering the user, right? Making that experience better.
Yeah, correct. So, I mean, I'm reminded by this clients I used to have, right? There were two 90-year-old homeowners in North York, beautiful property, retired, and they both had smartwatches.
Yeah.
I remember looking at them and being like, how are you operating smartwatches when you need glasses so you can see and like all this stuff? And they made me realize, they're like, no, like this is normal. Like they control the home locks, right, from there, because they're super. There was like, I used to sell smart home technology, and they were one of my best clients. They upgraded everything in the house.
Yeah.
And they figured a way through their grandkids' help to connect their smartwatch to their front door. So even their like a few integration like that. But like, if their heart rate drops below a certain amount or the temperature drops to a certain amount, there's alerts to go to their grandkids. There's alerts to go to the doctors. Their analytics are going to are being sent somewhere. And I'm like, holy crap, you know what I mean? And I started looking more into it, and the actual target market for the biggest market for Apple Watches is actually the 50 plus range, which is phenomenal if you think about it, right?
Definitely.
So on your point, idea of not just health, but also wellness is built into these products.
Absolutely.
Being connected to your family members who can keep an eye on you, tracking you better, your movements within your current lifestyle, right? All those kind of things can be tracked. And we think about this too when we think about medicine and the way we practice health, right? Is that, you feel bad, you go to the doctor, you get prescribed something, a pill, and you walk away. You look for that quick solution.
Right.
But before all this, like the idea of naturopathic medicine is kind of growing, right? The idea that like, how can you build your lifestyle, become healthier? Fix your diet, fix your sleep, right? Fix your social circumstances, fix what you're eating. Like all these kind of things come into a factor and effect. And like further what you said before, like the idea of personalization. What might be the standard before is not the standard unilaterally. Like everyone's standards can be different and baselines. So these tools can really help us personalize to the person what their healthcare needs are, from diet to sleep to interactions, but also help guide the next wave, I guess, of medical healthcare workers, right?
Absolutely.
We're not just like, oh, these are the check marks, your symptoms you're facing, here's a pill. But 15 minutes in and out of a walk-in clinic.
Right, exactly.
But more proactive, as in like, here's all the data reports, this is what your profile suggests. How can we preemptively tune to be a better human?
Right.
And I'm really interested in this kind of version of healthcare, because being proactive, right? And it's almost like you're tuning individuals to become better. And that kind of messaging especially works really well, I guess, for the future. So I guess from your standpoint, what do you see in this industry? Like, what are the blockers? What's moving? Any issues happening?
Well, I think we're at an interesting inflection point right now, right? I mean, let's not ignore the fact that this is a very unfortunate circumstance we're in. You know, actually, to be honest, like, so like it's sitting home for me right now. My dad is in a long-term care facility, and I literally found out
Uh,
yesterday that someone had 3 staff and 1 resident has tested positive. So he ended up getting the test yesterday, and he'll find out within a couple days if he's got it. So like this is hitting home beyond hitting home. But on the same vein, I mean, don't waste a good crisis. One of my mentors mentioned that to me, and I was like, shoot, like you're right. I mean, what are you gonna do? Sit home and stir, or figure out what is the opportunity out there, right? I mean, if you can do it, if you can't, I get that too, right? There's like those memes out there where I think I'm paraphrasing, but it's like if you don't come out of this with a new skill, whatever, then you wasted it, kind of deal. But then there's the other flip side, which I actually more subscribe to, which is no, well, no one has gone through this in their life, so you don't know how you're going to react from a mental health standpoint, physical standpoint, etc. So you deal with it and cope with it any way you can. I mean, in my world, I'm lucky in the sense that we're like, as a family unit, we're good. Like, we've got a good routine for the kids, etc. And so there is the ability to take advantage of this. So, you know, from a business standpoint, it's like looking at, okay, how are people going to be interacting in the future now, right? There's going to be definitely a lot of more digital means, and understanding how to get data from people without actually being with them in person or having that distance, right? I think that'll become a lot more prevalent as we move forward in the world and as the pandemic slowly starts to unwind. One of the things we're really focused on, to be honest with you, is understanding that whole nuance between the employer and the employee, right? That disconnectedness where, you know, even further, when you were in the office, how much did your employer really understand about your health, right? Your mental health, your physical health, you know, your performance at your job. A lot of it is an indicator of how healthy you are. You know, and how much did your employer understand that? So prior to the pandemic, like, that was conversations we were already having, where a lot of employers were already feeling like they were disconnected from their employee base. But now here we are, where we're working from home by ourselves every day. Imagine just the heightened level of that, right? Especially from a mental health standpoint. You know, I think it's fantastic that we can connect digitally and ensure we're seeing each other daily. But there's definitely an element of being physically disconnected. You know,
Absolutely.
I've got friends that live in condos. I mean, a lot of people live in condos. I mean, I'm blessed to be able to live in a house, but I can only imagine being in a condo, especially if it's maybe 600 square feet, right? Like, and you got to be cooped up in there all day. That's a challenge. So we don't know what we don't know right now. To your point, it's been 6 weeks. Um, who knows what happened? Like, does this become like the real life version of the purge? And like, people start going crazy because they just can't stand being inside. I mean, we're seeing, you know, definitely reactions in the United States around being inside and being stuck away from work. So yeah, I mean, we're really focused on understanding, like, how can you give an employer the ability to stay connected through health and wellness with their employee now more so than ever, right? Now, really engaging with them where you're going to already be challenged with them. So there's been some really good conversations on our end, and I think we'll have something in the near future to be able to show for that. So it's been exciting.
Absolutely. Was it with you that I talked about the show Billions?
I think you mentioned something the last time we spoke. I don't watch it myself, but
Yeah,
you mentioned, yeah.
the performance coaching side of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been working in sales for a long time, and some people who might be listening to this podcast, they might think, what does an employer, what business do they have access to health or the well-being of their workforce? Well, it's very important, right?
For
How
sure.
guided how healthy your team is, how reflects directly to how productive they are, which directly goes into your business and what you're doing. And the idea of performance coaching really interests me, right? So it's more proactive than it is reactive. Rather than being like, morale is down, let's bring in somebody to talk to somebody. It's like,
Right.
let's have like a resource or asset or some kind of procedure in the company to be like, how do we fine tune the individual into
Right.
become the best way they can be, right? So one of my most interesting experiences was working at like a commission only sales team. 60 like raw, hungry, commission only salespeople, coming together in a room trying to figure out how to move a product or a service and
Right.
strategizing to move forward, you would think like one of the lessons I have is that is like how much time you start putting into personal development,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Like especially in sales, managers and leaders spend a lot of time on talking about personal development.
Right.
And one of the main reasons I love sales is how open that conversation is compared to other industries, right? It's like how are you feeling versus how to guide your feeling, how to control yourself better. I've
Yeah,
had leaders get up and for 40 minutes talk about spiritual well-being and how to
mm,
align yourself and how to meditate and how to keep control of how you feel better and how to identify how you feel, right?
yeah,
Because it's so integral to what you do to be able to guide yourself and move yourself forward and motivate yourself. You understand
absolutely.
yourself, and this type of thinking was new to me because you think this is such a different thing. The workplace is meant to be a professional, come and go. You
Yeah,
put up
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
front
yeah.
and you just do what you
Absolutely,
need to do. And
absolutely.
spirituality, meditation, working out, all that stuff, your diet is supposed to be something
That's on
else
you.
you need to keep
Yeah,
away. That's on
you.
you,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
right? So what I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on or what you're seeing about how technology is breaking this barrier, right? How are employers right now utilizing this technology,
Yeah, it's a good
utilizing
point.
these analytics?
Because I would say that we're on the cusp of that happening. There's been definitely some examples of it in the marketplace where you're seeing employers engage. So, as an example, we work pretty closely with Johnson and Johnson, and I
Mm-hmm.
would vouch they've got a pretty good engaged workforce when it comes to health and wellness. And naturally, they're a health and wellness company, so you would expect that. But they go above and beyond. One of the examples. And this isn't really technology, but it was just, they started putting immunity boosters in their cafeteria, and they aren't like their cafeteria isn't like a Google cafeteria where you just kind of take what you want, but the immunity boosters were there specifically for people who ever wanted it. Right when the pandemic started in January, they immediately implemented that, and then they started working on, okay, what's the path now when we want to engage with employees, and so they started doing virtual yoga sessions and virtual meditation sessions. I mean, a lot of that is now sort of par for the course, right? We're seeing a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that already. But I would vouch that within the corporate world and just business in general, that's still not necessarily really prevalent, right? You're not seeing and hearing a lot of large companies really stepping their game up. Um,
Yeah.
I came from IBM where we did have yoga classes and Zumba classes in the building, after hours for employees or at lunchtime. Um, but that was partially just like self-serve. It's kind of like, okay, go do it. It wasn't necessarily saying, like, your manager saying to you, hey, you should go participate, it would be good for you, kind of thing. And by the way, I'm going to go too. And I think another component to this, beyond like what are we seeing in the technology space that allows for this to happen, is what are we seeing from a leadership standpoint, where leaders are actually saying, I'm going to go do this, come follow me, right? Let me be the example of what a healthy workforce looks like, and let me show you that I'm actually trying to participate as well, not just telling you, hey, go do that, I think it's good. So there's a lot of nuances around that. But like back to the J&J example, I mean, they definitely embraced a lot of collaborative tooling in order to make that happen. And from what I've understood so far and what I've seen through minor examples with them, they're pretty engaged. It's been very helpful. I think that'll just continue to go on. Uh, you know, um, Bringing it back to home, like my kids have a Saturday morning dance class, and it's on Zoom, right? So we broadcast it on the TV in the basement, and there's like, 8 6-year-old girls on Zoom, just like, hi, 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 just like screaming at each other, right? Meanwhile, the dance teacher's like trying to, and then she's like, all right, everyone's muted, mute. And then like, all
Yeah.
they're still trying to chat with each other. You can see their mouths moving, but you can't hear anything. Um,
Yeah.
I think right now we're still kind of figuring it out, to be honest with you. I think all of the data is there when you're looking at, okay, we've got wearables that can kind of give you insights, and the tooling is there from a collaboration standpoint. We're seeing evolutions when it comes to video and conferencing and things like that. I don't think anyone's really broken the mold though. But then maybe we don't need to. I don't know, right? I mean, again, this stuff had been around for a while. This technology, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you saw last night, like Travis Scott did a concert on Fortnite, right? Where it was like an avatar of Travis Scott rapping to
Yeah.
Fortnite players jumping around with their giant battle axe. It was pretty
Yeah.
cool. I
Yeah.
remember when they first did that. That was with Marshmello, the other performer, and I was like, "Hey, that's
Yeah.
the future." Like
Do you
connecting.
play Fortnite?
I don't, but I am wasting away playing Call of Duty right now, which I need to
Same.
stop. If I've got
I
bags
think,
under my eyes right now, you'll know why. Like,
unfortunately, one of the habits that I formed was moment that COVID happened, I dusted my Xbox, plugged it in,
yep,
and turned it on, and that's been a wrap. You know what I mean?
yep. It's we're
Yeah.
trying to. I mean, you got to stay busy, right? You got to get your
Yeah.
mind off of things. I mean, you do what you can.
But
So
honestly, like I'm looking back at like my 17, 16-year-old self and thinking this is the best thing ever. Because I'm taking sales calls and I'm
yeah,
playing COD. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
was always thinking in my younger days, I'm like, how can I blend my work and Xbox together?
Absolutely,
You know, and I'm
absolutely.
like, I'm living my 16-year-old dream.
My so I'll be a little transparent. So I came up to bed last night at like 2 a.m. and my
Yeah,
wife is like, why are you living like you're 16 right now?" I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know. That's a very good question. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But again, I
Life is
mean, back to my earlier point, like we don't know how we would react through all of this. Frankly, I know for a fact I'm not going to sustain a life where I'm staying up till 2 a.m. every day. That's just
yeah.
not going to happen. Maybe that starts to morph into something different.
Mhm.
But I mean, with the technology the way it is today in our world, staying connected is so easy. So now it's a matter of how do you form your routine around that, right? We're so used to having that like intertwine between the world being connected through our phone, our laptop, and then being able to kind of shut that away. Other like through maybe you have a really long commute like I do, where I go downtown and then I can't be connected to anybody other than like taking a phone call. So that's kind of like the initial connection, and then also getting home from work, and then there's family time, dinner, etc., and staying disconnected. But now we're not like there isn't much of that happening. So how do you compensate now? Like I know for a fact I probably shouldn't be in front of my laptop as much as I am right now, but I'm compensating for the fact that I'm just home all day, and that's what it is. So it's a matter of, I guess, maybe figuring what does that new norm look like too, right? Staying connected, but
Absolutely.
also still disconnecting.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to shift back a little bit to your project with that at your help and what you're working on, right? So I just want to clarify: are you guys like a consumer app? Are you a B2B app? Like what exactly is your business model?
Yeah, so we've got both. From the consumer side, it's your typical health and well, not typical, but it's a health and wellness platform, both on Fitbit and the iOS platforms with the Apple Watch. And so that just gives you perspective of your personal health, and you feed it data, it gives you back insights, and personalizes that experience back to what we described. And then on the enterprise side, that's where it gets pretty interesting because we're able to provide experiences that are unique to employers. So there's four key buckets we play in. Workplace wellness being the first one, which we've kind of been speaking about. And then we've got retail pharma, where we're able to kind of take data that users would input from a symptom standpoint. And so this is completely opt-in. This isn't like we're taking data and then using it for marketing purposes. This is simply the users saying opt-in, I have a runny nose, I have a headache, and then here's your offer for said pharmaceutical that might help with that ailment. The third bucket is clinical pharma. So we will be working with a really major pharmaceutical company. We just signed a contract for it with a first clinical trial happening in September. And so the ability to understand user symptoms and back to us being able to kind of follow that trend and understand deviations against that trend. When the key with a pharmaceutical company is administering the drug, when is the right time to administer the drug to understand the efficacy of the drug. So oftentimes they might administer it too late, and so you'll never know if the drug actually worked or not when they're experiencing
Hmm.
symptoms. So we're able to kind of flag when someone's about to experience a symptomatic episode, and then send that a notification saying, hey, go see the pharmacy, you're experiencing XYZ, go get the proper drug. And then the fourth bucket, which we started to explore in January, but just because of the pandemic has died down for now, is fatigue risk management in aviation. So understanding from a pilot and a cabin crew standpoint, how tired are they really, right? So we have the ability to understand fatigue levels through personalizing the data we collect in our app. And the idea is to be able to show a true value for that on a personal level. Right now in aviation, they'll do a biomathematical model that will give you a generalized view of how tired someone might be based on their demographic, i.e. 50-year-old male pilot. This is how tired they should feel, kind of deal. Obviously, it's a generalization, and so we're able to tailor that to a very specific use case, which is the actual pilot themselves. And the idea is to be able to give a better view. So they'll create, major airlines will use what's called fatigue risk management systems. And what these are like kind of like really large scale platforms that manage the pilots, where they have to check in and give reporting on how they feel. And it's all related back to, how tired and fatigued they are, because obviously they're operating a giant aircraft that could be very detrimental if they don't operate it properly. And so what we were chatting with the likes of FedEx and Air Canada was around how could you personalize that to your pilots and your cabin crew, and leading up to the flight, give them better perspective as to how fatigued they are. So 4 key buckets on the enterprise side that we've been actively playing in. It's been fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting bucket, but I think my real interest here is with your tool. Are you trying to go more into assisted care, or like more like a virtual care kind of situation where like your tool is now assessing people based off the biometric data and are prescribing like actual clinical things to do? Or does it go to like actual clinician to better diagnose it? Right.
So
for example,
go ahead. Oh, okay. I mean, in a perfect world, firstly, we will never diagnose, right? I mean, we aren't considered a medical device or clinically approved company. What we're giving you is analytics against when you're deviating against your health benchmarks, right? So very, very simplistically, it's a mathematical model at times that's just showing you statistically when you feel a certain way and then when you deviate against how you feel, right? And so understanding when you're starting to deviate against that, we can give you trending analysis. And obviously the more data you have, the better the trend gets and the more accurate it is. So at this point, we've got a very robust data set that can show you that. We are actually actively starting a research project where we'll be able to give you like a good view from a research standpoint, the clinical aspect of what we do. But the idea for us is to be able to show you that deviation against your health benchmarks. And then, in a perfect world, which you were about to say, I apologize for cutting you off.
Yeah.
We would love to be able to create that pipeline where it then the next step is to go to a pharmacist or a doctor and be like, okay, here's the data set. You make the assessment. You decide based on the patient what is needed for a healthy outcome. That is kind of where we've looked at starting to go. We actually had a conversation about that with a very renowned health tech organization. They do cell phones and other things. They're very massive company. And they had said, actually, we were probably a little bit too early for our time, just because, especially from an EMR standpoint, there's already other solutions there that pharmacists or doctors are trying to do. I mean, my dad, we had an interesting summer with my dad before we got him into his long-term care facility. And the paperwork, I can just like, holy cow, like the paperwork was insane. I'm like, why can't you guys just transfer this digitally to each other? Like, why can't you just share it? And each individual can't do it, just can't. And I understand that, but obviously that's not the most efficient way of doing things. It just isn't. It's not right. So, I mean, that alone needs to be solved before we even look at, okay, here is this like emerging innovative technology that would help you with your patients, right? So, I mean, it'll happen eventually, right? I think, and even further, it's I would say that's a Canadian viewpoint. There's other parts of the world for sure that most likely this could take place sooner than later. So we are looking at other parts of the world as well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think people have this alignment that, especially our healthcare industry was less like conceptualized and constructed in a master planned way. Whereas in reality, everything's kind of been like ad hoc, added together and layered on top of each other, like old processes on top of new equipment on top of old. And a lot of those things don't communicate each other. And a lot of things happen in isolation. And I think EMR integration has become like the guiding light behind that, but it's just showcasing like the pool of information and informatics and processes that don't communicate, especially in healthcare, in the healthcare industry. And we talk about, how inefficient it is or how much lineups we have. And the front-facing side, we can see the issues the healthcare system has. But on the back end, it's an iceberg, right? You see the tip and you're like, oh man, that's so bad. But you don't notice like the pool of information in the back end that is just backlogged and just like, it's kind of sliding along.
Definitely.
So it's really interesting what you guys are trying to do, both from a consumer standpoint and an enterprise standpoint. One of the things I would really be interested in is, this profile you're talking about, this is my profile of my data, of my health, right? How can I assign that in a clear and safe way to my doctor so they can have proactive information about my health, but also maybe to a life coach who's looking into my sleep patterns, right? Maybe my fitness trainer is looking into my dietary patterns, right? And within like, we have an automated process tool that kind of reports back to you about who you are and what you're doing, but also you have these trained, I guess, professionals or specialists who are now looking at it, who are diagnosing it from different aspects,
Definitely,
and giving more proactive information, right?
Yeah, there's like a whole ecosystem out there for sure. I look at it like we're actively talking to a pretty reputable major physiotherapy organization right now that has several locations in GTA across North America, etc. And that's the name of the game. Like, how could you engage with people where now you're creating personas and profiles for them and set them up with the right care? But again, back to us, it's like, okay, we give you that data. Here's the data for you to go and use to better assess what that person actually needs. Right? You're right. There's absolutely a use case for this. I think we eventually arrive there in some shape or form. I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens with this whole contact tracing thing as an example, because I think this is like the most the boldest, I think, technology statements that companies have made, where they're like, okay, let us get access. Well, you turn on your phone and your Bluetooth, and let us help you figure out where you're being tracked, right? And obviously, like, there's a little privacy element of it and all that. But like, would you ever have thought that devices would actually, I mean, the jury's out on like Google and Google Maps and GPS and all that. We all know that, your location's being tracked, but I mean, it's being tracked because you're obviously using a map. But there's always been that stigma. But now all of a sudden it's like, now you're sort of being tracked for your healthcare purposes. And it technically, I mean, to be honest with you, it feels like as if you almost, if you equate it to Google Maps, it's like if you kept Google Maps on all day long, then you're being tracked all day long anyway, right? But the thing is, this is now for like the everyday consumer to understand where they've been, what they've been in contact with, who they've been in contact with. Oh, and by the way, there's this deadly virus that you're trying to avoid, right? So I don't know, like it's an interesting time where, does this contact tracing technology, as an example, open the floodgates to new innovations and people become more susceptible or more willing to accept? And the line drawn is now pushed further. So now people are like, okay, I'm actually okay with that. I mean, my whole theory has been all along, like, how often do you actually look at the terms of service agreements when you click accept? You never do, right? Yeah. You want to get to your thing as soon as you can. They could be saying, hey, we're going to take your firstborn from you. You didn't even see that. Like, no one looks at that anyway, yet there's still that stigma. So I feel like maybe this is an interesting time for this to all take place, and you start seeing what you're describing around having that like profile created for you, where it's now shared, and you're like, yeah, I'm cool with that. You know what? I didn't realize it in the past, but I'm actually already giving consent to all these parties anyway. So why not actually try to help myself, right? I don't know. It's an interesting time, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about it on this on the podcast about how do we create like almost like an internationally recognized like passport, like a data passport, right? Each individual person has like an account where like all their data is stored, just so it's one, it's visible to the person. Hey, this is all the data that you have that's like floating around everywhere, and it's kind of like it's kind of like centralized for you.
Right.
But two, the data is more richer, right? I mean, right now our data is fragmented across all these different providers, kind of hoard it amongst themselves because it's so valuable. They believe it's so valuable. But if you pull it together, it actually becomes more enriched, right?
Absolutely.
Pulling your, your entertainment history with your healthcare information to your sleep patterns, to your driving record. Like, the more points you put in, it's like an exponential value to the actual the data and what we've done with it. So I'm really interested in these profiles, data profiles that we built based off these aggregations,
Yeah, yeah,
from the
yeah.
various systems.
Well, even further to that, there's the whole stigma around your data being used for marketing purposes, et cetera, right? What if you could take all that data, combine it, now you got a great profile, and now you can go auction it off to like RBC and be like, all right,
Exactly.
here's my
Absolutely.
data, it's worth $15, right? And there's like a value behind it, and you go sell that. I mean, who wouldn't do that, in all honesty, right? Like, I'm pretty sure the majority of people in the world, I mean, granted, I mean, I understand the privacy implications, blah, blah, blah. But if you had control over that, you'd be like, yeah, I'm cool if you want to know my purchase history. I went to Markville Mall, I went to the mall, whatever, and I went, and bought stuff from Walmart or what have you. I don't care. Cool. I bought hot dogs. You want to buy that from me? Perfect. Go
Yeah.
nuts. Go buy that data from me.
Well, I think like real, true, enriched data is actually worth a lot. Like if you look at like Facebook, when Facebook was like finishing their before the IPO, one of their last rounds when they're raising, they valued that like they have no revenue other than ad revenue. They value each individual person on their network as being valued at $125 USD. That's the
Right.
value of the
I
data,
remember that. I remember that.
right? And it was just like a mind blowing thing. It was like in 2015.
Right.
That's just one platform. It's taking the data that they collect on you, the user, mostly self-reported, and by some other people, crowdsourced, it's worth $125. Imagine aggregate that with all these other platforms you sign up with and have Google Maps data, right? Your Netflix accounts and what you
Sure.
watch there.
What
The
are you
aggregate, I
interested
think
in?
it's yeah. I mean, I think it actually becomes very valuable. You now
Absolutely.
have like a digital clone of who you are. That's the ultimate repository of information, what you like and what your preferences are,
Yeah.
that companies can interact with. Like one of the interesting thoughts I think about is like the next Google is going to be a search database, but for machines.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
how to query each other, right? So if your data can be stored in this kind of in a query tool where it's all together, and now you have these restrictions: who can access, who can't, and who can transact with it, the paywall. Well,
Right.
then I think there could be a potential future for like these machines to talk to each other. This this data pool that you have communicating with the resources that you're allowed to. It's
Right.
transacting, buying and selling the data, accessing the data as needed. So if they want to market to you, they can pay. You can do this, right?
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think
yeah.
the ultimate tool here is someone who figures out not just how to get the data aggregated in one tool set, but how to secure it and give it to the people, right? Give it back to the individual.
Yeah, yeah. And further to that though, then what is it worth? Like, who decides what the marketplace is? I've been super fascinated with that. Like, um, you know, I mean, I guess a bit of it is supply and demand and the uniqueness of the data. Like, where is it coming
Yeah.
from and what does it represent? But I mean, it almost, I mean, in some respect, there's a bit of like a cryptocurrency element to it, where the supply and the demand kind of dictates what the price is and what it's worth. But that would be super interesting too. Like, who is the entity then, right? That becomes a whole new ball game because that entity becomes a very powerful entity very quickly. Is it a
Yeah.
government? They say they implement it. Is it a bank? Is it, just a brand new company that starts to create this auctioning platform of data?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. I don't think we're that far off from that, to be honest with you.
Mm.
I can, like, what we're discussing and describing right now. I don't. It's not far fetched, right? I think this is naturally the way the world goes towards. And further, maybe even it's a new social network, right? It's like you join this social network because your data is going to get sold and you can control that data. So you don't care because you use the social network knowing what you know.
Mhm.
So you share what you want, knowing that it's not going to be yours. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's the way the world goes towards.
Yeah, it's almost like a database social network. It's like, like this is
Yeah.
everyone's database, the actual, all the data stored, and the data is communicating different things. And these have interoperability of and see, and like pretty much visualization of who's accessing what and where things are stored and where things are.
Or maybe
But yeah,
Facebook ends up like saying, "Hey, we actually want to start paying you for your data."
yeah, I don't think that'll ever happen.
I don't
That's
know.
their entire model. They have a paywall set in front of data sets, right?
I know. I know.
But like, could you imagine though? Like, if like Google or like Facebook did that,
Yeah.
I think it'd be a power move. I mean, it's
It's a
stepping outside the comfort zone.
it's a huge business opportunity. I mean, now you create a two-sided marketplace almost where now the user gets money and in return that data gets sold off to the people they've already been selling to. But then maybe now you get a better, richer data set because now I know my data is going to be used. And oh, and by the way, if you try harder to share your data or try harder to do certain actions, it'll actually be worth more. So for instance, maybe I'm trying to sell my data to a car manufacturer, and they care a lot about my purchase history, on how adventurous I am, and where do I spend my time on weekends, because the model of car they're trying to sell me is catered to that kind of lifestyle. Okay, well maybe then I try harder to actually go spend time in adventurous settings like rock climbing or something like that, right? And create that data set for myself, and then go back to them and say, okay, here's the data you were looking for now. Like, here you go, kind of deal, right?
Could you imagine? You only buy this car if you went rock climbing twice.
I mean, who knows? This is
That's
you know what we're doing right now? We're actually writing a Black Mirror episode as we speak.
we are,
This is
we are.
exactly what it is.
It is, right? Like think about that too. Like instead of a car company spending like $1 billion developing a new line of cars, like a new model of car, and then spending like hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing campaigns, projecting something onto the car,
Right.
rugged, all terrain, right, off-roader, when 99% of the people using it never going to take it and utilize it for that point of view,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? They're selling through a story, through a narrative to convince you to buy this. But rather than that, knowing what you actually want and being able to market towards that, I think that's super interesting, right?
100%. No, I agree
Um,
wholeheartedly. I think that is the future. I think we see that come in waves, though. I mean, there's no way that's happening overnight, but I don't know. I think it depends on what data. You know what industry I actually think would be the industry that would start that? I think it would be gaming, like esports, because there's such an interconnected community there where there's a sense of trust for sure. And also people are so used to like in-game purchases. I would be curious to see like, hey, show us your game data, how often you're playing or what games you're playing, and get a reward for it, kind of deal. Like get either an in-game purchase you would normally have to pay for, or just a different experience within the game itself. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's a very innovative up and
you're right.
coming industry.
I mean, one of the most addicting things about Call of Duty is your stats.
Right.
It's like your progression levels, your stats, how to improve, your kill death ratio. Like, I mean, I remember like being like, I think like 17 playing Call of Duty and looking at this and like, why can't life be like this? Show
Yeah,
me my progress level. How can I evolve up?
sure.
Like what are my stats right now? Like, why can't I have things more quantified, right?
Hmm.
And because that's addictive. I think you take any human, you show them their personal record and how to improve and progress towards improvement, and they get addicted. That becomes a feedback tool by itself.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's super important. And okay, before I let you go, I mean, I want to circle back to the Athletic Tech Summit,
Yes.
right? Talk a little about that. Yeah, could you explain a little more about the thinking there? I know last time we talked a little about it,
Yeah,
but
yeah, for sure. So that was a crazy idea that I co-launched with two partners of mine last summer, and the idea around that was could we connect pro athletes with the tech ecosystem in Toronto, pro athletes wanting to learn more about technology and the business opportunities that are existing there, and then the tech companies kind of wanting to get connected into some high net worth individuals, influencers, people who could connect them up, because we know that pro athletes have a very vast network of people, right, outside of their sport as well. And so we came together and we said, okay, well, why don't we run a conference? It was pretty successful. We got picked up by pretty much every major news outlet in the country, which was cool. And it grew from there. So we've built out a board of advisors that it consists of business executives as well as athletes. We've since run like athlete founder dinners where we connect athletes to actual tech founders and just kind of see where that ecosystem starts to evolve with conversations. Lately, because of the nature of the way the world's moving, we've been doing Instagram live sessions where every Tuesday at 6 p.m., we host different athletes on our Athlete Tech Summit Instagram page. And the idea there is just having conversations around technology. How are they going through the pandemic? What have they been up to? How are they staying active, healthy? We talk a lot about, collaborating via video conference, that kind of thing. And yeah, we've just been trying to keep that brand alive through different means. We're looking at doing a digital summit later this year, probably call it early Q3. And the idea there is to kind of digitize the way we did our summit last summer. Similar set, we did a lot of speakers, panels, etc. We had a lot of guys from the NBA, we had folks from NHL, different sports basically represented. And we just want to keep that going. Our whole goal is to be able to introduce athletes to what the business opportunities exist out there beyond their sport. Unless you're like a Steph Curry or a LeBron, the majority of them don't have a business team behind them to understand technology and what are the opportunities. And so we kind of act as that middle agency to be able to bridge the gap between what could be an interesting tech investment or an opportunity to partner with, and the actual athlete themselves, making those connections happen. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's a totally different world. It's another entrepreneurial endeavor on my end that is kind of like my nighttime focus. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing that as well. Great intersection Absolutely. Of tech and sports.
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things we've seen in the last couple of years is that the ability to run these finance companies, a VC fund or an investment fund has gone, the cost has gone drastically low. Like a team of 5 people can run like $100 million fund nowadays with all the tech stack available. So we've seen an explosion of these high net worth individuals who, rather than invest into segregated funds or multiple funds, they set up their own.
Yeah.
And and if you more than that, if you have name recognition, like Steph Curry, but also like Snoop Dogg has his own VC fund, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And I think him partnering with somebody else has forgot their name, but it has a VC fund. Everyone, I think, Will Smith has a VC fund.
Yeah.
Rahman has a VC fund, right? And they co-fund alongside of bigger funds and things like that. But it's interesting to see the availability of capital now, right? The democratization. Before it used to be like a more corporate, board-knit, like old boys club that kind of ran these kind of funds. Where to invest things. But the cool thing is now all these funds are kind of popping up. More capital has become accessible, but also the ability to access capital become better.
Right.
Whereas think about the culture of talking to somebody who works at Snoop Dogg's VC fund versus going to a traditional VC. Right, it makes it seem more open and acceptable to a wider range of people. So that's really interesting. But I think what you're trying to talk about more is like how do you conceptualize these athletes to think more about on a business sense, technology, just technology, or startups in general?
I mean, a lot of the athletes we work with are entrepreneurial or have like entrepreneurial tendencies, and so. And the majority of them are not technology focused at all, but just the fact that they've got that passion for business and want to do more than what's outside, what's inside their sport. That's where we really engage and do well. There's been quite a few good connection points we've made with athletes and a few tech startups, as well as just helping them navigate, maybe there's an endorsement deal and what to look at and what might make the most sense for an opportunity for them to partner up with a brand. There's definitely been use cases there as well. But yeah, I mean, the nature of the game is, these athletes are so in tune and so focused on their sport as they should be, right? To be the best athlete and, basketball player as an example as they can, that they don't get exposed. This isn't a world that they get exposed to too dramatically, or if it is, it's pretty traditional. So when we started this, what we saw was the majority of athletes were doing real estate and or like a clothing line, right? Like very traditional, consumer focused, the stuff they're familiar with, which is fine too, right? I mean, there's definitely money to be made there. But then obviously there's like massive opportunities out there, right? And so what we learned, right, there's locker room talk where you hear about a guy who's invested $200K into a startup, and all of a sudden that startup's worth like $100 million, and that $200K is going a long way. That breeds competition. You're dealing with a very highly competitive group of individuals already, where they're like, well, how do I get involved in that now, right? And where do I go? And the majority of them don't have the answer for that, or don't know where to go and look. And even further, if they find something, is it an actually good opportunity? Is that tech startup something that you should actually put money behind, right? So we kind of work in a way of trying to alleviate a lot of those questions and do the due diligence up front to ensure that what they're looking at is something that would be viable, something that they would actually want to take their time. And further to that also is something that they're interested in, right? You take for granted, the conversation you and I are having, I'm sure a lot of the times could go over the heads of regular day person, right? Like understanding data and sharing that, all that stuff. So also looking at opportunities that make sense for them, common places for that are like, health and training, esports, consumer apps around social media, that kind of thing. Ensuring that we're tailoring the opportunities or the conversations to things that they'll actually be interested in. That's a huge component of it as well. So.
Perfect. That's great. Let's wrap this up because we're hitting our benchmark.
For sure.
For AccuHealth, how can people find it if they're interested in the product?
Yeah, so it's AchuHealth.com right now, available on the Fitbit marketplace. Just search up Achu, ACHU, you'll find it. And then on the iOS platforms, it'll be everywhere as soon as Apple doesn't think we're a COVID app anymore. So we're just talking to the review team right now, but I don't foresee there being challenges, but yeah, so iOS will be there soon, but for now, Fitbit ready to go.
Is there support yet for Android smartwatches?
In the works as well, my friend. Yep, Android will be there probably a lot sooner than everyone thinks as well. Definitely before the summertime, we'll have something on Android. So
perfect. I'm looking forward to that. I have a Samsung Gear 3.
There you go.
I'll check it out.
Perfect.
Awesome. Andrew, it's been great. I'm gonna end the episode right here. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. Stick around for a few minutes and we'll do a debrief.
Sounds good. Cool.
Perfect, guys. Thank you.